You're listening to the Horror Spot Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 2 of the Horror Spot Podcast. I am your co-host, Blake Lambert, and with me is Nick and Dan. Say hello, boys.
Well, what's up?
Hello, boys.
Hey there, campers.
All right. So on today's episode, everybody, we are going to be talking about Friday the 13th. Not just the first movie, not the remake, but the whole series in non-sequential order. So if you're still listening at this point, you're going to hear us go off about the entire series.
And Dan talk about how much he loves the bad ones, which is pretty...
Well,
Yes.
Well, it's only Jason X that I really enjoyed that, and Jason Takes Manhattan.
See, I have a soft spot in my heart for Jason Takes Manhattan, so I'm not gonna even knock you for that one. But Jason X, I mean, there's a line.
Bitch gets liquid nitrogen, but that's beyond the point.
You know what?
But
That was actually
good
pretty
point.
cool in that. That was probably the only cool part in that whole movie. When the sex robot starts fighting him, though, that was pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, kind of KM. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the liquid nitrogen kill was cool, and that's like the only one they ever feature whenever anybody talks about Jason
Yeah.
X, is that one. Yeah, man. To me, that's like the great value brand of the Friday the 13th movies.
All right, so in case anybody out there doesn't know what Friday the 13th is, and you've been living under a rock for the last 38 years or something.
Yeah, how many years have I been living under a rock, Nick?
Well, I guess.
Tell me.
How old are you? 29?
Yeah.
For 29 years then. Anyway,
Yeah.
so Friday the 13th spawned so many sequels, made millions and millions of dollars. I'm not sure.
Halloween knockoff.
It's true. It is absolutely a Halloween knockoff. Sean S. Cunningham, who made the movie, admitted that full-heartedly. It's 100% a Halloween ripoff. It's not so close to where you can get mad at him for it, but yeah, it's definitely a ripoff. Blake, why don't you? I can't remember all the details. I remember we were talking about it before, how Sean S. Cunningham put the ad in a magazine or something for the movie.
Yeah, so before Shauna S. Cunningham had made Friday the 13th, he was all about, making like kids films and shit like that.
Well,
Like, he
I
made
mean, Last House on the Left
sort
with
of.
Wes Craven.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was kind of a knockoff, or not a knockoff, but like a one-off kind of deal. Like he produced it with Wes Craven, things like that, and it did really well. And I believe that kind of whetted his tongue for the horror genre. He knew he did it once with Wes Craven, so he could do it again. But before that,
And
he was
at
doing
that
like kids
time-
films.
Well, actually, no. At that time, Nightmare on Elm Street wasn't even a thing yet.
Correct. Yeah, Nightmare didn't come out until 1984, and at this point, we're still talking like late 70s.
Yeah.
So 1980 rolls around, right? Sean Cunningham has had a couple flops of movies along with Steve Miner, who was his producing partner, who would later go on to direct Friday the 13th. I want to say 2 and 3, bunch of other movies, and then
H2O.
notably Halloween H2O. Correct. Sean Cunningham had this really good idea. We'll call this movie Friday the 13th. It'll be the scariest movie ever. It's my poor Sean Cunningham imitation. But yeah, he put an ad out in Variety magazine back in 1980, basically advertising this movie, and they hadn't even had a script written or anything like that yet. He was just trying to gain interest for it, and he eventually did get producing. Got a script written by Victor Miller. It was originally supposed to be called A Long Night at Camp Blood, but it was changed to Friday the 13th.
I kind of like that better.
Yeah, I know.
It's like
kinda cool, huh?
Twitch of the Death Nerve. Kind of reminds me of that.
Exactly. Which people claim that
Yeah,
Friday is a
we'll get
rip-off
into
of
that.
as well.
There's a few kills in the Friday the 13th universe that are complete ripoff of Twitch of the Death Nerve.
Oh, for sure. And Cunningham himself even says he hasn't seen Twitch of the Death Nerve or
Bullshit.
hadn't seen it up until that point. But no offense to Sean Cunningham, but I mean, dude, he's a Hollywood guy.
Yeah.
He can just lie out his ass about whatever to make himself sound good,
Yeah, and that's total horseshit. No, I'm not buying that for a second.
for sure. But yeah, so anyway, so he placed the ad in Variety magazine, and the rest is history. Came out in 1980 and spawned a butt ton of media.
I got a hot take on the first movie.
Yeah, no, he's got a quote. It's saying, "I'm not a fan of brutal, ugly horror films. I don't like them. Don't enjoy them."
So it's pretty out of character.
Yeah, especially with the Friday films, and then you can't do anything new with special effects. You can't get any mileage out of killing more people or being more graphic because it's all been done. You should excuse the expression "to death." the pornography of violence is similar to the pornography of sex in that when it's presented without substance, it becomes a turnoff and it self-destructs.
Okay, well,
Is he talking shit about like Friday the 13th as a whole, or just like the horror genre
here's the
as a
thing.
whole?
He only made the first movie, so he could. When was that published?
That was just a random
I mean, let's
quote.
assume it was after the first movie. Between 1980 and 1985, there were what, 5 movies that had been released at that point.
Yeah.
So
one came out
he
every
could have
year.
he could have very well been talking about the sequels because I don't think he had anything to do with the rest of them.
No, he didn't.
So yeah, my hot take on Friday the 13th, the first one. First of all, surprisingly, when I first watched it, I had no idea that Pamela was the killer. Spoiler alert. So it really, really ruined it for me, and I've never got over it. I've never got because I knew who Jason was.
I was gonna say, Nana Visitor played Pamela Voorhees in the reboot for Friday the 13th. So I knew Pamela was the first killer because of that whole intro sequence to the remake of Friday the 13th.
Well, yeah,
And
and
wasn't Nana Visitor on a Star Trek show or something?
Well,
that's how he
yeah.
knows. That's how he
Yeah.
knows.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, you also saw Friday the 13th, 20, like 17 years after I did, so it was like it was a big chunk. So like with me not knowing as a 10-year-old, it blew the whole thing for me. I couldn't even believe it. And then I think I watched right after. It was like on Halloween or something. I watched part 4 right after that, and then I was like in love with the series from then on.
Yeah, man. I honestly can't remember the first Friday I ever saw. I want to say it was 7, the New Blood. It was either 6 or 7, but I'm
Ooh.
leaning towards the New Blood. Scared the shit out of me as a kid. Of course, it's, the look of Jason in that one is probably the most visually striking out of all the designs.
Oh yeah.
If not the coolest design.
Not even without the mask either, but with the mask on, you can see his mouth, like the side of his mouth, and how it's all
Oh,
rotted.
absolutely. Yeah, it's like every wound that Jason has ever had up until that point is evident. And of course, he's been under the lake at like 10 years at that point, I think. If I'm remembering the canon correctly. But yeah, I mean, like the exposed, spinal cord, ribs,
Mhm.
the damage to his face from part 6, the axe wound, the machete wound, the bullet wound from 6 from when the
Yeah.
sheriff shoots him in the head. Just everything. I mean, it's there. John Carl Buechler did an absolutely amazing job of designing that makeup. And it just terrified the fuck out of me.
See, that's
right?
one thing you can't take away from the Friday the 13th movies is the makeup is always, 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 always on point.
Oh, absolutely.
That's his face
Yeah,
from A
but-
New Blood. That's the 7th movie, Dan.
Oh, that
I mean,
would explain
whether
why I've
it's-
never seen it. He looks
Yeah, I
like a goddamn deadite.
Yeah. Oh, well, we're going to
Actually-
go into that eventually, too, actually.
Funny you mentioned that. So one of the producers of Part 7, called the makeup design, said
Oh,
he looked
yeah.
like a frog. And there was a lot of hot drama going on the set of that
Oh,
movie.
well-
Like the MPAA, forgive this term, but the MPAA totally raped Part 7 in terms of what they were forced to cut out.
I mean, there's some scenes that have been released, like, for instance, the dad coming back out of the lake. It's so much more, disgusting than they made it. Like, he looks
Oh,
like some cheap
absolutely.
zombie from a George Romero movie from the 60s.
Absolutely. Or when Russell gets hit with the axe in the face,
Yep.
there was supposed to be a longer cut for that.
Hmm.
Or when
I think the sleeping bags,
that-
right?
sleeping bag, there were a few more hits on that. And then when the character of Ben gets his head crushed, you only just see the very beginning of what was supposed to happen there.
Mhm.
But in the original uncut version, which we will never see because the work prints have just been degraded from what
Yeah.
I understand, Jason is supposed to crush Ben's head down to basically the size of a walnut, just totally collapse his head, right, to kind of show off his supernatural
Yeah.
strength or whatever.
Has
But I
anyone
digress.
thought about getting a priest?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so, actually.
I feel
Yeah.
like, well, shit, all these people are dying. Let's get a priest.
Well, the
west
whole
of the lake.
The whole thing is the reason people keep going back is because every time it happens, they try to cover up. Like they at
Mhm.
some point they changed it to Camp Forest Green. So with them trying to cover it up, every time someone goes there, it's a like a tall tale of Jason Voorhees in the woods, just like every other camp in the entire country has.
Sure.
Fuck
So
that.
yeah,
I'd rather
I
go
mean,
to
it's
Camp
just
Shred.
Oh God.
yeah, the story of Jason is like an urban legend at Camp Crystal Lake, right?
Yeah.
Nobody believes it until you're about to be murdered. Until you're staring at him right in the face.
All right. Well, let's talk a little about the first movie here, if we want to get into cast.
Sure.
First, I think the first person to mention is probably Adrian King.
Yep, the final girl from Friday the 13th. The original.
Yeah. What was her boss's name? I can't remember his name.
Steve Christie.
Yeah, that guy was weirdo.
Yeah, he's kind of a perv, wasn't he?
Kevin Bacon.
Oh
Yep,
yeah.
Kevin Bacon.
I'm just completely brushed over Kevin Bacon.
So speaking of Kevin Bacon, one of the things that I absolutely love about horror movies is you could think of them as a launch pad for people's careers, right? Because like after Friday the 13th, Kevin Bacon's career just took off. Like, it was a
Course.
couple years.
Well, Footloose.
Well, yeah, but Footloose was when he really took off. But I think Friday the 13th was like, no, it wasn't his first movie. I think Animal House was his first movie, but one of his early films was Friday, and then a couple years later, boom, he's a bona fide star. Same thing for like, not to get too off topic, but same thing for like Patricia Arquette in Nightmare 3, right? I mean, after that movie, her career took off, and she just became this huge thing in the 80s. A lot of people get their start in horror movies, and I think that's pretty great.
Yeah, it's not a guarantee though.
Not a guarantee.
No.
No.
With how many horror movies are being put, I mean, it's definitely more of a guarantee back then.
Yeah.
You got all these. It's not even straight to DVD anymore. You can just put them up on the internet. There's hundreds of thousands of them that are made every year, or I wouldn't say hundreds of thousands made every year, but there's a lot of really bad movies made.
Absolutely. And then, for every one star that comes out of horror movies, there are a dozen that don't. And you never really see them up on the screen again. And that, that may not be the end of them. Because, like, a lot of them, especially in this first Friday, a lot of the actors came from, like, the New York theater scene. So, like, Adrian King, Janine Taylor, Robbie Morgan, Harry Crosby. They were all theater actors just trying to get their names out there and just so happened to get cast in this movie that did extremely well.
Fun fact, Dan. Harry Crosby is the son of Bing Crosby.
Mhm.
Which was awesome to find out. I was
Yep.
like, what?
Yep.
So we have Betsy Palmer. Only did the movie to get a new car.
Yeah, that's
At least
correct.
she's honest about it.
Yeah, right. And from interviews I've seen, she like really distanced herself from this for like a long time.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And then finally came around towards the end of her life. Rip Betsy Palmer. I guess she just didn't realize how much of a following the Friday
Well,
movies had.
I think it's the same thing that's going on with Jamie Lee Curtis. Because I don't think she started doing conventions until the Blu-rays came out. The Blu-ray.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Jamie Lee's a different, story.
Yeah, I don't
well,
really trust her anyway, because she does this whole "this is the movie I wanted to make" thing every time she makes one. So.
Yeah, God bless her. She is a treasure, but yeah, we've heard that song before.
Yeah,
right? I mean,
a little too many
we've heard
times.
it. Yeah, we heard it with H2O. We're hearing it with 2018. So we'll see. I don't want to talk too much about Halloween because I could talk forever about it without getting off the track. But yeah, I mean, in the 70s and 80s, man, horror was a great way for people to launch their careers.
Yeah.
And a lot of careers came out of horror movies and sci-fi movies. Dan, Sigourney Weaver, Aliens,
Corey Feldman,
Corey Feldman, yeah,
Kevin Bacon, Jamie Lee Curtis.
Mhm.
The list goes on and on and on and on.
exactly. So yeah, I mean, basically the cast of unknowns, except for Betsy Palmer, in the first movie, it's like a lot of fresh faces. I mean, I guess Walt Gorney, who played Crazy Ralph, had been around for a
Oh.
while.
R.I.P. Ralph. I forgot all about Ralph. My favorite character.
Oh
of,
man,
all
how
time.
did you forget about Crazy
On
Ralph?
the bicycle for like 5
Yep,
minutes. just
that's the
riding
Yeah.
one.
away.
Sneaking into food pantries and scaring the shit out of teenage girls.
You're all doomed.
What a crazy
You're
fuck.
all doomed.
Well, I love how we got again discount Ralph in part 8.
Right, for sure.
He kind
Oh
of
yeah,
he sort of looked like him too.
the ship hand.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
totally.
So who
Jason
who else we got
Voorhees.
for cast?
Well, so we got Adrian King as Alice, who is the final girl of the movie. Betsy Palmer as Mrs. Pamela Voorhees, who is the killer in the movie. Janine Taylor plays
Hey,
Marcy.
spoiler alert.
Oh my God, 38 years too
Jeez.
late. Sorry. We got Janine Taylor, who plays Marcy. If you've seen the movie, you know Marcy gets the axe to the face. Great, great kill, great cut. Robbie Morgan is Annie, who is the first victim of well, not victim of the movie, but she is the first of the camp counselors in this story to die.
Well, I mean, technically.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry,
Barry and
sorry.
Claudette,
Yeah,
who
Claudette.
were the counselors in that kind of flashbacky scene.
Yeah.
It's in the very beginning of the movie. So I guess Barry would be the first victim of Friday the 13th,
Yeah.
and then Claudette, who's killed off screen. But the next victim is Annie.
Yep.
Yeah, which during the events of the movie, Annie was chronologically first out of the camp counselors that were present. So
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
bitch didn't run fast enough.
No, not even.
Well,
No. Well, I mean,
well, she jumped out of the Jeep and like messed up her knee or something.
It doesn't
So.
matter. Grandma Voorhees caught up with that bitch hella fast.
yeah, that's true. See, that's what I was about to say. I don't know how urgent my escape would be against a 65-year-old woman either. So maybe she wasn't expecting her to catch up. Who knows?
Maybe. Who knows?
Yeah,
Right.
She wouldn't slow down and fucking hop out, grab a rock. Let's go, bitch.
Well, she could have just circled around and got back in the Jeep. Probably. There's a lot. There's a whole. Listen. This is like.
Hip checker.
Yeah, this could just go on for hours.
Totally. All right. So next up, we have Kevin Bacon as Jack, who gets the unfortunate arrow through the neck in a totally awesome scene. Fun fact: if you watch any interviews with Tom Savini about that scene, he will tell you about the mishap that happened there. So for those of you that don't know, when a practical effect like this happens, and blood needs to rush out, somebody is always pumping blood through some sort of like pneumatic pump with a tube that goes to the prosthetic and it gets pumped out to look real. In this particular effect, the tubing came off the pump. So what had happened is Savini's assistant, a tube with blood still in it, and blew into it. So when you see the spurt of blood coming out of Kevin Bacon's neck, that's why. That's Tasso blowing in the bloodline to make it go blue.
Which is a last second legendary save for that effect.
Yeah. It
Yes,
was
that's
well
correct.
done. It was a nice touch. And I hate the blood and gore stuff.
Yeah, I mean, last second legendary. So it's fun to see how things like that actually get like put into the movie. Okay, next up we got Bill, who's played by Harry Crosby, who, as you said, was Bing Crosby's son. After that, we got Laurie Bartram as Brenda, who is unfortunately no longer with us. She is killed off screen, but I believe she just gets beaten to death in the movie. You see her get tossed through a window and her face is all messed
right.
up. So,
Yeah, right.
so it's kind of really unknown how she gets killed.
Or if she even does.
Yeah, right. And then next we got Mark Nelson, who plays Ned, the camp clown.
You know what? I want to say something about Ned before we get. He almost killed Brenda. Okay.
He did.
He almost
shot
killed
an
her.
arrow
What
at
a
her.
what a psychopath. All right. Not cool.
Right.
Anyway, continue.
Oh, that was the
Right.
jokester douchebag?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
fuck him.
Wait till you see my trick shot. No.
Right.
What,
Yeah.
premature
All-
ejaculation? God.
All in a way to flirt with her. Hi, I'm gonna shoot an arrow at you. Pay attention to me. Yeah, no, I don't think so.
Hey, you want a date? I could have just killed you right there. Hey,
Mhm.
I'm Ned. How you doing?
Right. Ned is killed off screen, but you later see him with his throat cut, so that was pretty brutal. And then let's see, we have Peter Brower as Steve Christie.
Creep.
Oh, yeah,
Uh,
that's the camp counselor. The one with those really, really short shorts.
Yep, he's short
Yep.
shorts.
Yep, he is actually the owner of Camp Crystal Lake.
Yeah.
So I believe he had inherited the camp from his parents, who ended up crazy and broke, as the truck driver Enos will later say in the movie.
20 grand into that place.
20 grand, right? 20 grand. He'll end up broke and crazy, just like his folks.
And then
Um,
he gets shanked. Fuck this guy.
Yep, gets shanked by Mrs. Voorhees, later found hanging from a tree.
Dressed like the Gordon Fisherman.
That's right. Well, it was raining, so. And then we've got, that's it for like the main cast, and then after that you've got the supporting players. So you got Rex Everhart as the truck driver, who kind of gives, some exposition about the camp to Annie as he's giving her a ride out to the crossroads. Ron Carroll is Sergeant Tierney, who's a cop in the movie,
Who can't ride a motorcycle.
who cannot ride a motorcycle, but you know who can? Ron Milkey, who plays Officer Dorf, or is the one that's supposed to ride the motorcycle, but I believe Tom Savini was doing that in the riding scenes. Tom Savini, of course, is the legendary makeup effects artist.
Alright, listen, if you don't
and
know who
actor.
Tom Savini is, you get out of here right now.
Right?
He was
yeah,
the
you're
guy with the dick revolver.
He
in,
sure
From
was.
the
Dawn.
sex
Yeah.
machine and from Dusk Till Dawn. That's right. And last but not least, we've got the late great Walt Gorney as Crazy Ralph, who makes not one but two appearances in Friday the 13th movies and is uncredited as the narrator in Part 7. A couple other people too. You got Willie Adams as Barry, Deborah Hayes as Claudette, and then you've got Sandy, the waitress.
Oh yeah, right.
Right? And then last but not least, Ari Lehman as Jason. So let's talk a little bit about Jason here before we get into the other movies.
He didn't exist.
That's correct. In the first movie, he did not exist.
Good
At
job,
this time-
Dan.
Yeah,
Yay.
figured it out, guys. Don't put me in a lake.
Dan is smart. Anyway, so you are right. At this time, Jason did not exist except as a character in a dream, which they surmised that the surprise end of Friday the 13th is just a dream.
Then he's still
Um,
out there.
But he's still out there. That's correct. Sean Cunningham has said many times that he did not Friday the 13th to become a franchise, that there shouldn't have been any sequels, so forth and so forth. And that Jason drowned in Camp Crystal Lake in 1957. But as we all know, that didn't quite happen the way that we think it did. So yeah, Ari Lyman was just a little kid when they made this movie. I believe he was friends with Sean Cunningham's son. Actually, I think he was friends with the Cunningham family, if I remember correctly. But I digress. Anyway, so yeah, Ari Lyman got this role. I don't know if he's acted in anything else or not. I'm sure he
I
probably
don't even
has.
see him on the IMDb.
He's at the very bottom of the cast list.
Night has
Oh, there he
been
is.
mounting.
Yeah.
Or Night on has been mountain.
Night on Has
Uh,
Been Mountain.
Yeah, Burton lap catches up with the monsters of yesteryear to find out what they're doing today. So it was a comedy flick. So he's still probably playing Jason.
Yeah, apparently he
okay.
composed the music for a slasher movie called Terror Telly Chopping Channels.
Yeah, so he is a musician. He has a band, I believe, called First Jason.
Well, I mean, with a face like that, Jesus Christ, it'll be hard pressed to find something else.
Right. Okay, so yeah, there was a huge gap in his acting career. So he was in a movie Manny's 78, which was another Sean Cunningham movie. And 2 years later, Friday the 13th. And according to IMDb, he doesn't have any other acting credits until 2006. So there we go.
All right, well, now that he's out of the way. Am I wrong? There was only just that one Jason in the whole movie?
Correct. That is the only time you see Jason is at the jump scare at the end, when he pops out of the lake and pulls Annie under the water.
Okay. Well, why don't we go straight into the broads and the bros?
Broads and the bros. Go for it.
Who do we got? Let's start. What did we start with last time? I think the bros, because I remember Dan declaring Bob not a bro anymore.
Right.
So let's
yeah,
go.
so-
Let's go with the broads. We'll start from the lower, less important ones. We'll skip Claudette.
Pamela Voorhees, bottom of the barrel.
How?
Gross.
In what way is Pamela Voorhees? But we're not talking about attractiveness, okay?
Oh. Okay. Well,
We're talking about Dan, you're so sexist, dude. So we're not doing we're doing by importance. So actually no, we're not doing by importance. We're doing main Aside from Pamela, we're gonna go camp counselors. So
Okay, so worst camp counselor, Annie.
why?
Couldn't even show up to her job on
That's
time.
true. Yeah, that's true. She didn't- that's a good. Okay, that's fair. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. She didn't make it.
Yeah,
I think
I heard.
I
I
think
heard
the
she was
re-
supposed to be a really good cook, though. Hey, whatever.
I think the reason Pamela killed her first was because Pamela was the cook at the camp.
I never thought about
But
that.
probably
But
not.
yeah, you are correct.
She was late and she
Yeah.
found her. It was a coincidence.
Yeah. Oh,
so
yeah, totally.
Brenda, played by Laurie, what is it, Bartram?
Bartram.
The
Yep.
late Laurie Bartram.
Yep. Yep.
You know, Brenda seemed like the Linda of the movie, but just
Kind of.
But
yeah.
just-
I mean, she's the one that instigated the strip monopoly. So yeah, I think she was kind
but
of
she's just such a better person though.
right.
like,
she
I
seemed
felt- I-
really wholesome.
Yeah, I felt like the character they were trying to get her to be was not who she was.
Mhm.
See, I think after Annie, it should have been Marcy, because she was
Really?
having sex on the job. So she was
Ooh.
one of those that Pamela Voorhees envisioned. Like,
Yeah.
these are the motherfuckers that were responsible for the death of my son.
Yeah, well, I think it was all opportunity for her. I don't think she was targeting anybody in
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, that could have been in Pamela's mindset. Like, fuck this bitch. She's fucking on the job.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Dan has a point. It's true.
Yeah.
One of the main things that Pamela blames counselors for making love while her little boy was drowning. So
Actually, I got a question. Did they ever? I know they did in Freddy vs. Jason, but obviously that's not canon. So like, did he just drown, or was he bullied into the water like in Freddy vs. Jason?
it's never revealed in the movie how Jason got out. Like it just is established that he didn't know how to swim and that he drowned.
See, I'm gonna go ahead and assume that he just drowned because I feel like Pamela probably would have went after the kids, instead of the camp counselors not paying attention.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's
Uh,
established that she was in the kitchen while this was happening. Counselors weren't paying attention. I mean, we know that Jason was kind of like a special needs kid,
Yeah.
right? So, why he went out into the water, nobody knows. No, especially since he couldn't swim. But
Well, I
it
mean, why
happened.
do children walk into swimming pools and drown?
Yeah,
They
right,
just
exactly.
Don't know better.
That's correct.
I mean, yeah.
Yes.
If anybody didn't know any better, by the looks of him, it was probably Jason.
Right.
What was really confusing was me and Dan sat down. What was it, yesterday, Dan?
Days ago.
Yeah, and watched part 1 and 8. And in part 8, there's so many different versions of Kid Jason.
Yeah, it's really inconsistent.
Oh, and
Um,
one of them didn't even have a fucked up face.
Yeah.
Like, so for 75% of the movie, every time she saw Kid Jason, it was just normal face.
Yeah, it was weird. They were swapping him in and out. It was really, really strange.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I think he has like a messed up eye.
No, no.
Uh,
Like,
No?
this kid was wearing zero face makeup.
Well, there's three
Oh.
different Kid Jasons. There's really ugly one, there's regular
Mhm.
one, and then there's regular one with a really ugly left eye.
Oh, yeah, Forrest Whitaker one.
Yeah, the Forrest Whitaker Jason. So like, I don't know what the deal with that. They just didn't care at all. There was
Yeah, because there's the one that's in the water in part of Rennie's flashback. There's one that appears as a ghost in her cabin
Yep,
where he's all
that's-
like shaking and
yeah,
whatever.
but when you see him first in the cabin, you see him out her port window.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
'cause
that's-
it looks like he's underwater.
Yep, that's the regular one. And then the one you see inside of her cabin has the Forrest Whitaker eye.
And then there's the one where she drives the car into him.
Oh yeah, when she's all
where
doped
it's like
up.
the chop shot. The dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, where
Yeah.
she's all doped up. All right, so anyway.
Yeah, that one actually used to freak me out as a kid because I went to school with a kid who kind of looked like that. I mean, not as severe, but he was like really fair
You gotta
skinned.
stay away from the incest
Um,
babies, dude. Like,
yeah,
it's fucked up.
It was like really fair skinned, and he had like a really bad lazy eye and stuff like that. And I always like equated that kid to Kid Jason from Part 8.
Watch that kid on the swim team.
For real.
All right, so anyway.
So next up, Brenda, I guess, because she
Well, I-
was getting drunk on the.
I just said we were talking about Brenda already.
Oh,
Yeah.
did we?
Yep.
Yeah, so anyway, Dan, you're on the right track here. I don't think Brenda deserved. I kind of liked her better as a. I would have. Well, I would have liked her better as the final girl, not Alice. I don't feel like Alice was like. They were trying to push her character. There was no character arc, first of all, for most of the characters, obviously. But I didn't care about Alice at all.
Yeah, there was really no development for her character. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Adrienne King did an excellent job.
Well,
in
I
the
think she
acting,
did what
yes.
she could have done.
Sure, exactly. Fresh-faced kind of, teen living her life, kind of deal.
You
But
can't
yeah,
tell me she wasn't sucking off Mr. Christie though.
well, that's the thing is that there's kind of like this weird like subplot where it's implied that like Steve Christie and Alice were a thing, and then she may have broke it off because he says, give me another chance. And actually, she wanted to leave. If I remember correctly, she said she might have to go back to
I mean,
California.
To me, that sounds more like he made a move on her, and
Yeah.
she turned him down. Not that they had something going before.
Hmm. That's a possibility. But we never find out. So I don't know if that's released in any like supplemental material, like any of the like spin-off books or anything like that. But you could take it however you take it. Whether or not
I mean,
they had a thing.
it
or if
really,
he was just-
really doesn't even matter anyway. So
in the grand scheme of things, no, it doesn't matter at all. But I see your point having Brenda as the final girl. I mean, she kind of fits the mold, right? A
Yeah.
little bit more wholesome, whatever. And you say that there's this trope that final girls are the ones that don't do, drink or drugs or whatever. But like, there's this whole scene with Bill, Alice, and Brenda where they're smoking a joint and drinking beer while they're playing strip Monopoly. So that totally breaks the mold
oh yeah,
of the
absolutely.
final girl.
And Alice was she was in the game. She was about to play, but
Yeah,
the door
she
blew
was. She
open.
was. She was about to take off her shirt.
So she's
get
no
into
better.
it.
She's no better than Brenda was.
Exactly.
See, it's not
I
like
think-
with Lori where she was worried about going back and getting her books, and
Yeah.
you get what I'm saying.
Exactly, and I've felt for a long time that Alice only survived to be the final girl because she stayed inside the cabin and fell asleep.
Yeah.
And, she wasn't out moving around as an active target for Pamela Voorhees.
All right. There's the scene. I remember she locks herself in the food pantry.
Mhm.
You hear Pamela just like smashing everything.
I don't
in
think
the
it was
cabin
I don't think
on
it
the
was.
other
Was
side.
it the food pantry?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was the
she was
yeah,
hiding
it
in
was.
the
the-
Oh,
food
you know
Yeah,
what?
it was the pantry.
I just watched Terrifier again, and I was thinking of the scene where she locks herself in the cabinet. But go ahead.
Yeah. So the Pamela Voorhees is just smashing up the cabin looking for her, and you hear the footsteps walk to the door, and then you hear the door open, steps close, and then you don't hear nothing. Now, with the shoes that she was wearing, there should have been some clip clops, so when she shows up at that food pantry and very gingerly twists that knob, she should have known something was up. She should have known that Pamela Voorhees was still in the house.
Well, I mean, if you're in a situation where all your friends are dead and some old crazy broad's trying to kill you, I don't think I'd be counting the steps.
I'd give
Yeah.
her a wombo combo though. Like fuck that.
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't let. Well, here's the thing, right? It's not like with Jason where Jason's just manhandling everyone. Pamela was catching him off guard.
Mhm.
So, like with Steve, for instance,
Okay, so she's in the house or in the cabin. Molly Whopper ass on the inside. Don't run. There are chairs. There are frying pans. Use something.
yeah, I mean that's easy to say if you're not in the situation.
All right.
Fight or flight.
If you're a 17 to 20-year-old girl and you've never been in that kind of situation before, you're not going to be like, all right, here's what's going on. She's trying to kill me. I got to fuck her up. That's not what's happening. She's hiding
Right.
in a pantry, which is exactly.
The first thought on anybody's minds though is, oh, this motherfucker's coming after me. I need to fuck him
Yeah.
up.
Oh, well, okay, so here's the thing, right? You're sounding just like every single non-horror fan that sees Halloween and says, why'd she drop the knife? Why'd she go upstairs? Because she's checking on the fucking kids, all right? That's why she went upstairs.
Fuck the kids. Survival instinct.
See, exactly. That's what I'm saying right there. Anyway, you know what?
Uh,
We can just agree to disagree, Dan.
Sure. Okay. And if I could say one thing about that particular scene, I see both sides of the argument, but consider this. Okay, so throughout this entire movie, up until the point that Pamela Voorhees is revealed as the killer, she has been stealthily creeping around this camp, offing these counselors one by one. She's used misdirection to kill Steve Christie. Obviously, he recognizes her, knows who she is.
Well, see, that's what I was gonna say. I don't want to interrupt you, but
Right.
that's what I was gonna say is to where she was shining the light in his, or the light of the, was it the car or a flashlight?
I want to say it was her car. It may have been the flashlight, but she turned the lights on her Jeep.
Well, I think the lights on her Jeep was for Alice at the end. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Either way, she manipulated the light from her car or flashlight to shine in Steve's face so she could get close enough to him before she realized who she was on her way there.
Correct,
So
but
Grandma's
he did.
in-
Yeah.
Right, but he did recognize her, and his guard down. Oh, hey, what are you doing out in this mess?
Yeah.
Stab. You watch him, and he walks towards her nonchalantly. Right, he has no idea that she's about to murder him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I
Now-
used to work with a chick who looked like Pamela Voorhees. Like no
Oh, yeah?
shit. She still works there at Sears. Like, it's
Nice.
fucking crazy.
Right, but going back to the scene in question, right? You are correct, right? I mean, there should have been some clomping around in the boots, but consider this: Pamela hasn't found her yet. She's hiding in the closet. What's to say that Pamela doesn't go back into stealth mode, right? Obviously, I use the term stealth mode loosely, of course.
Yeah, well, she's not throwing
But-
smoke pellets and repelling from zip lines.
Right, exactly. She's not Darkwing Duck or Batman.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, for sure. Right, she knows that Alice is.
crawling. Fuck it.
Yeah, I mean, she knows that Alice is somewhere in this cabin, right? And she's tossing, stuff around, looking for her, opening doors, whatever, looking in closets. Can't find her. So and she's her last target, right? Pamela is like tunneling Alice. It's her drive, it's her focus to kill this girl. So why not do everything you can to do that, including sneaking around?
Yeah.
So when it gets to that point where Alice thinks that Mrs. Voorhees is gone, and then you see the shadow appear between the slits of the door, right? I mean, that's just Mrs. Voorhees doing her thing, being sneaky and catching Alice off guard.
So I know we kind of wandered off of Brenda a little bit, but it has to do with Mrs. Voorhees too. When she gets thrown through the window, are we against the idea that Jason was already there helping?
Jason
am.
wasn't like he didn't exist in this movie.
Yeah, but there's indications, and he did exist. He was.
He was dead. Therefore, lack
Yeah,
of
but
existence.
What I'm saying is, do we support that he wasn't actually dead?
Absolutely not. I do not support that. He was dead.
How do you explain Mrs. Voorhees throwing Brenda through the window?
Adrenaline, man.
Yeah, okay, Blake, what do you think?
I mean, you have panicked moms out there. Their baby's trapped in a car or fucking under a car, and they fucking lift that shit up.
It's not the
Fucking
same.
adrenaline,
It's
man.
not the same thing.
It could very well be. We don't know. Ask Sean S. Cunningham.
I think that this falls under suspension of disbelief, right? Was Mrs. Voorhees capable of lifting a grown woman and throwing her?
No,
Yes,
no.
she was a teenager,
Um,
about $1.20.
Well, I mean, maybe not.
Even if
Who
she
knows?
was 120 pounds, Mrs. Voorhees is a brittle
And would
old
she-
lady.
Yo, she was fucking everybody up.
Yeah, but do we
Be
know?
capable of
Going toe to toe with Alice.
Do
The
we
fucking-
know it was Pamela killing all those people though? We never see her do it. We never see her kill anyone.
I'm of the mindset it's fucking Ninja Granny, and she's just fucking it up for Megatron, guys.
All right, well, go ahead, Blake. Go ahead with what you're saying.
Well, I mean, again, I think it just really boils down to suspension of disbelief, and to fit the tone of the movie, right? Because I mean, up to that point, you had no idea that the killer was Mrs. Voorhees. It could have been some dude. And Steve Christie. Well, no, because when you see Brenda gets run through the window, Christie had already been killed. Oh no, I mean, at that point, he had already been killed, right, off screen. So, but I don't think. See, me personally, I don't think that Jason had Like, I don't. I know we're gonna get into the whole Deadite thing later on.
I was going to say they didn't have the Necronomicon yet.
That we know of.
What do you mean?
Well,
To bring Jason back from the.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
well, yes and no. We can get into that later. I
yeah,
don't.
we'll
too much
definitely
on-
talk about that.
Yeah, but I mean, I'd for all intents and purposes, I think Jason is for the first Friday movie. I think Jason's completely off the table. Um, I mean, it was all Mrs. Voorhees.
So, let's say, considering everything with, was it Jason Goes to Hell with the Necronomicon?
Yep.
So let's put that into perspective now. How
Okay.
possible is it now?
Well, it really kind of depends, man. So, I mean, the classic theory, right, is that Jason didn't drown. He actually survived his drowning and was living in the woods for
Mhm.
all that time, and that he witnessed his mother being beheaded on that Friday the 13th in 1979, and that he has been haunting the camp ever since to take his revenge. A living Jason, right?
Yeah.
Not a zombie.
See, it would make
Yeah.
it would I would buy that too because I don't want to make you lose your thought or anything, but
Mhm.
with the whole with I think it was well, he wasn't in part 5.
Correct.
So part 6 was the first one where he wasn't running. So
Yeah,
I guess I
that was
could
the
buy
introduction
that.
of his-
I guess I could buy that to where he was human those. See, that's another thing that makes me support that idea is that he was running in the first 4 movies. So
That's-
that would give the I mean not the Necronomicon thing, but him being alive that whole time.
Yeah, I've always felt that Jason Voorhees, at least when he was alive, was just something more than human, right? Kind of like Michael Myers as the Shape, not the Michael Myers Terminator Michael that you get later on in
Yep.
the series. But he's just something more than human, right? I mean, he's definitely human, but he's definitely something more
Mhm.
too. I mean, just the punishment that he's dealt out in the 3 original movies, not excluding the first one, 2, 3, and 4, where you have Jason as the main villain, is astonishing, right? I mean, he gets chainsawed in the arm, he gets a machete to the shoulder, stabbed in the knee,
Hatchet to the head.
not axe to the head,
Yeah.
not just a hatchet, full blown wood splitter to the head. He gets hung. Anybody else that would have snapped their neck in 2 survived that. All right, and then
But-
going into the 4th movie, you get his hand split in half.
Yeah. See, but I
and-
think where he was ultimately killed was when Tommy really went into him with the machete.
Absolutely, yeah, it sliced his freaking brain in half.
Well, not even that, but afterwards, where die, die, die.
Oh
where-
yeah, because you see his fingers start to
Yeah, yeah.
right after that. So yeah, definitely. I mean, ultimately, if you really think about it, I think that Jason Voorhees probably died from blood loss. And as ridiculous as that sounds,
Yeah, his wounds were just
um,
so unrepairable. There's, like-
catastrophic.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he just didn't have enough blood to support his circulatory system, and that's how he died.
Yeah.
right? But I digress. We can get into that here. But,
Yeah, so I can't even remember what this started from, but it was the
Well, we were-
Necronomicon.
Yep.
So for any of you out there that don't know, I'm probably gonna bring up the comic versions of whatever movie we're talking about on this on every episode, because in my personal opinion, they're better in most cases than some of the sequels. There is a comic called Freddy versus Jason versus Ash, where it's such a stupid plot, but where Ash is working at, what is it, S-Mart? That's the store he
Yep.
works at? Yeah, and so apparently he was like a manager at this point, and he gets sent over to another S-Mart to try to get it back in order in Crystal Lake, where Freddy's there, and I guess it's a direct sequel to Freddy vs. Jason because what's her name, the blonde in Freddy vs. Jason?
Oh, the Survivor girl.
Yeah, whatever her name is, who cares? Is there with the boyfriend trying to make sure that Jason's dead, Basically, Freddy wants to get his hands on the Necronomicon to get him out of the dream world so he can just be who he is in the real world. Ends up accomplishing that. We find out that Jason's a Deadite, and then Ash kills them both, obviously.
Right.
So that was my first idea of that theory. That was the first time I thought that it could make sense because it fills in a lot of the gaps and it makes it believable.
Okay, I can see that, but one thing that I would point out is that Jason, if he is a Deadite, doesn't act like a Deadite.
Well, see, here's the thing, right? So just going off of Ash versus Evil Dead, it's just
Mhm.
demons or some kind of beings coming from the book and possessing the bodies. So
Mhm.
let's say that's not what happened because apparently Pamela's the one that read from the book. So
Mhm.
she could have just raised him from the dead, and he's not all there mentally, obviously. So maybe
Sure.
it wouldn't affect him like it would a regular person.
It's possible.
I mean, it's stupid, but
Yeah, I mean, overall, I just, like, personally, I don't buy the idea that Jason is a Deadite. I mean, I like the idea of it, and it's kind of a fun way to tie them all together.
well, I mean, it's
right?
just obvious. It's just not possible either. Oh well,
Right.
I guess it might be because no. It's just not possible because he was a real undead person in parts. It was part 6, right?
Part 6, 7, and 8.
Yeah, so that was in 1986. I don't think Evil Dead came out till 89.
Yeah. So,
Or no.
well, I mean, Necronomicon has been around a long time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think this theory would even be thought of if Evil Dead wasn't a thing.
Correct.
Evil Dead came out in 1981, so it is like very possible. But whatever. Who cares?
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know where Dan ran off to, but he's not here anymore. So let's just talk about Annie.
All right, perfect.
I mean, I thought she would have been better replaced with somebody else that was already at the camp. I don't know who, but I would have wanted to see her like personality around more.
Oh yeah, I mean, she was so like positive and bright about the whole experience, right? Like going on about wanting to work with kids,
Yeah.
all that stuff.
She was the one really only excited, the only one excited to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then she gets her throat cut later on. Poor Annie.
Yeah, it wasn't much. That was pretty much the entire explanation of Annie for the whole movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
she
I
was
mean,
going-
actually, you know what? We can talk about the truck driver. She was way too trusting in that guy. That guy was a weirdo.
He was. I would pin that to different time, different.
Yeah, it's the
different
same
society.
thing as Tommy not looking back when Michael was driving down the street.
Exactly. Yep.
Who else do
Um,
we? Oh, you want to keep going on that?
No, go ahead.
We have Marcy, played
Right.
by Janine Taylor.
Right. Marcy. I actually like the character of Marcy. I think she, I mean, we're talking about a fictional character here, but
Yeah.
I kind of think that if Marcy was a person, she would have probably been pretty fun,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
hang out with. She does the quote in the mirror after, she's in the bathroom, stuff like that. And you can kind of tell that she, is genuinely a good character, person. She's just kind of, wanting to have a good time here at Camp Crystal Lake. She gets an axe to the face.
Again, I feel like there were some characters that just had way too much focus on, like, I said it earlier, Alice. I feel like
Mhm.
again, she would have been a better Final Girl. Like I feel that way about most of the other girls at the camp. I don't know what it is. I don't know why, but like first of all, I feel like their characters had much more of a personality. I don't know.
Well, Alice just seems so brainless. I mean, that's the thing. So you don't get a lot. You don't. You just don't really get a good feel for Alice.
Well,
like throughout
whoever-
the entire movie.
Victor Miller didn't make her character interesting in the slightest. There's nothing. I mean, they tried to do the artist thing, but they mention it once and then throw it away like it was nothing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's touched upon in Friday too.
Oh
Just a little
God,
bit,
yeah. Let's
like
talk
in
about
her
Alice and
apartment.
Friday too.
All right, we're gonna jump
Yeah,
into two.
I forgot about that. Yeah, we can talk. Yeah, 'cause you know what, we're not going over that movie in full anytime soon. I don't think so.
For sure.
Yeah, we can talk about Alice in part two. Ridiculous. What were they thinking?
Oh, man, I don't.
Because you know what? At that point, there's something interesting about Alice. She survived the whole ordeal. She got out of it. There would
Mhm.
have been a good reason for her to.
Wasn't
Go ahead.
wasn't she also away from Crystal Lake,
Yes.
like a
Yes.
ways away?
Yeah, so how did Jason track her down? They like
Yeah.
open up a phone book and be like,
Yeah.
"Oh, here she is."
And also, I think it's either his mother's head in the fridge or her mother's head.
Yeah, it's Mrs. Voorhees' head in the
Ridiculous.
fridge.
What is he? What is he preserving it? He's concerned with that now. He's had it in a cabin. All this. You know, whatever. So anyway, I feel like Alice. She could have had. They could have come up with anything they wanted. She could have went back to see if Jason was still in the lake, for instance, because she had that whole thing where he's still there. Or
Mhm.
she wants to go back and make sure that Pamela's not there anymore, or just go back to mourn her
Yeah.
friends. There were
Yeah.
so many ways they could have just brought her back. There was absolutely no reason to get rid of the character. They could have replaced the actress. That would have been fine.
Oh,
But
sure.
but there's not a I could not, whatever reason they would try to give to for an explanation to getting rid of that character is ridiculous.
Yeah, I kind of felt that Alice always got the raw deal there in Friday
Well,
2.
you know what it reminds me of? It's Rachel from Halloween 5. That's exactly what it is.
Yep, exactly. You have a character that you have already come to understand as a survivor, survives this horrible ordeal, and then in the timeline of the movie, 2 months later, is murdered off by the next villain, who in this case happens to be Jason.
See with
Um,
part 2 when Ginny puts on the sweater, right?
mhm.
That would have made way more sense for Alice to do because she saw Mrs. Voorhees wearing it.
Exactly.
And
Right.
she knows the way that Mrs. Voorhees talked to Jason because she was talking to him in front of Alice.
Hmm.
So
Absolutely.
everything it would have just made way more sense altogether if Alice never went anywhere.
I'm gonna
I agree.
posit a theory here.
What's up?
What if it was written for Alice to actually survive until the end of 2, but the actress didn't want to come back?
Well,
for
again,
anything
yeah, that would have been fine. I just said like even if they replaced the actress, I wouldn't have minded, as long as they kept the character around.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I mean, after Friday the 13th came out, Adrian King had a stalker. So somebody was like literally coming after
Oh,
her.
God.
Yeah, yeah. If you ever like watch any interviews with her, she was like living basically a fucking nightmare after this movie. Like this guy had gotten into her apartment, worked his way into
What?
her social. Oh yeah, worked his way into her social circle so that way he could be close to her. And I think she said eventually had a gun to her head. I may be misquoting, but like very scary shit. And this was like within months after Friday coming out. So
Wow.
at the time that Friday 2 was being filmed, the actress, Adrian King, was dealing with all of that shit. So it may have been that she just didn't want to do it. Maybe she was contractually obligated to,
Does she
or
have a
said, yeah.
gap between movies at that time?
Let's find out. I think Friday 2 was the last thing that she did.
Ever?
Ever.
Oh, then that would
Yeah.
make perfect sense. Then that's a perfectly good reason to not do the movie.
Yeah, so, okay. Yeah, huge gap. So she was 18th, Alice Friday 2. She was in Ghostbusters in an uncredited role in 1984, so a 3-year gap.
Yeah.
Next thing she did was in 1993, doing voice work in What's Eating Gilbert Grape. And then after that, the next
Oh,
thing she
really?
was in 2010. So yeah, huge gaps in work.
Well, you know what?
Um,
Hey, that's a pretty good track record for not working for a long time.
Yeah,
To do work in Ghostbusters and in What's Eating Gilbert Grape.
yeah, for sure. I think I don't school or
You're cutting out a little bit.
I don't know if she went back to school or something, but I know she became like a really good artist. And now she lives here in Oregon, where I live, running a vineyard. So she does Crystal Lake wines.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
Oh, okay, yeah, no,
Yeah.
she's saying the reason her character died, she had a meeting, or they had a meeting about it,
Does it say when
was
this?
in part two had come, her stalker was already present in her world. Like, she was
Mm,
already dealing with her stalker.
yep.
So she couldn't handle doing another film and dealing with him
Yeah.
because nobody else wanted to help her out with it. The police legitimately said, "Well, what do you expect? Look at the movie you were in."
Oh,
Kinda. So
fuck
they brushed her
you,
off.
dude. What the fuck? I'd be pissed. Yeah, I'd be like, all right, later.
Right. Peace.
Yeah, it's got to be some pretty scary shit, especially with it being like a movie set. And where did they film? Where's where was the second one filmed anyway? I think
Around
Pennsylvania.
the same area.
I think it
Yeah,
was in Pennsylvania. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I mean it was probably best for her to get out because that was a weird time for stalkers trying to kill.
Yeah, no. So the reason the guy says that he was stalking her was because he claimed that she reminded him of a woman who like spurned him, and
That what?
that spurned him, that like blew him off or like
Oh,
broke
okay,
his
okay,
heart or
okay,
whatever.
okay.
And him stalking Adrian King was his means of exacting revenge on that chick.
What a
Well, that's creepy.
fucking sicko.
Right? Yeesh.
With the arrest of her stalker, King believed her nightmare was finally over, so she tried a screen test for All My Children, and she had her first anxiety attack. And it took years of therapy to overcome the lingering feelings that accompanied the year and a half of torment.
All right, well that's all messed up, but I don't want to keep going into her personal life.
Right, for sure. All right.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. I know.
All right. So that being said, I think this is probably a good segue to start talking about Friday 2.
Well, we should talk about the bros in this one first a little bit.
That's true. Okay.
I mean, we can tell we don't have to talk about everybody. Ted was a goofball. Kevin Bacon was a horn dog. So was Ted, actually.
Well, I mean, he can't
Yep.
be much of a horn dog if he's got nothing to really stick in there.
Oh, you know what I want to talk about? Speaking of which, Dan, the scene where Ted is pulling, or Ned, not Ted. Ned's pulling a Sandlot just to try to kiss Brenda, and fucking Jack pulls off the worst dive I've ever seen in my entire life. He full-fledged belly flops. Full-fledged belly flops into the lake.
Yep.
All right, but yeah, we can go into part 2.
Sure.
Pretty similar cast. I felt, see again, like the whole Jenny being in a relationship with what's his name there?
Paul.
Yeah, it's like the same, it's almost the same thing, just extended and less creepy.
Yeah, I mean, basically, like sequels at this point were basically like wash, rinse, repeat of the original movie, right? So, I mean, with Friday 2, they tried to set it up as very similar, the same thing. Unseen killer, picking off kids left and right, so forth and so forth, and then the big reveal at the end. Ooh, it's Jason,
Yeah.
who you thought was dead, right? But yeah, I mean, you are correct. The Jenny and Paul having kind of a relationship thing, very much like Steve Christie and Alice Hardy in Friday 1.
Okay, so I guess we can talk about the plot. I mean, honestly, people, they're pretty much the same thing every single time until like the pretty late sequels. So basically at this point, Mrs. Voorhees is dead. They shut down Camp Crystal Lake, but a camp next to it's a camp next to Crystal Lake?
It's across the lake, yeah, the Packanack
Oh,
Counselor
okay,
Training
okay.
Center.
Yep, so basically Jason shows up and he's trying to get revenge for his mother being decapitated.
Mm-hmm. Sure is. So you've got a whole new group of people here. So timeline-wise, at the beginning of the movie, when Alice, 2 months after the events of the original Friday, and then when the movie really starts to get going, it's now 5 years since the events of the original. So some time has gone by here at this point. So it's worth noting, if you believe that the theory that Jason has been living in the woods all this time. So think about this for a second. If you subscribe to the theory that all this time, he's obviously going to be older, right? It's not like he just stopped aging, from like kid to adult.
Mhm.
So you know, at this point, so in the movie, so Friday 1 took place in 79, so this can be like 1984 at this point. So Jason, as a grown man, is going to be like 40 years old, somewhere, give or take, because I think it said he was born in the 40s, right? So, yeah,
Is that what? Is that? When did it say it happened? 58, I think, right?
57, I believe.
56 from what I read.
56, all
Okay.
right, well, there we go. So yeah, Jason born in the 40s, drowned in the 50s, came back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, so he's been living in the woods for a long time, apparently, according to this movie. Um, anyway, let's continue.
So let's go into cast a little bit here. We have Amy Steele as Ginny, pretty much just basically just Alice, not that different of a character. I'll never stop saying this. I don't think Alice should have been killed off.
Well, she wasn't trying to.
But yeah, the character could have been replaced by a different actress. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, she's basically like an Alice clone, right? I mean, it kind of eh, a little bit of, I mean, the movie gives like a little bit of backstory that she's in college, that she's studying child psychology, things like that, which I think kind of um, plays into what happens later in the movie. Like she kind of uses like weird child psychology against Jason,
Mhm.
which I find is
Oh yeah,
extremely
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
But yeah,
So that makes sense now. That kind of debunks my whole argument that Alice would be better at that whole situation than Ginny would be. Now that you bring that up, that does make a lot of sense.
sure, yeah. But again, who would have known that uh, Jason had a shack, with his mother's head in it.
Mhm.
Who knew? Uh, Nobody except for Jason. Um,
Well, I mean, people in the mountains do that kind of shit all the time. So,
that is very true.
Yeah.
but I'm gonna have to call that a night, guys.
Alrighty.
Y'all have a good one. Enjoy the rest of the cast. All right, guys. It was fun being here. We'll see y'all next time.
Yes, indeed. See you next time, Dan. All right, everybody. Well, so that's going to be it for the Horror Spot podcast for this evening. Stay tuned. Next week, we are going to be covering Scream, and then we will continue on with our coverage of the Friday the 13th franchise in later episodes. The next time we're going to be talking about this, we will talk about Friday the 13th, part 3 and 4, and the demise of Jason Voorhees and his eventual resurrection. Stay tuned next week for our episode on Scream, episode of Open Graves News, brought to you by the Horror Spot Podcast. Until then, I'm Blake.
And I'm Nick.
And we hope you all have a good evening.
Fuck you, Dan.
And we hope you all have a good evening.